Hello, Steve Snodgrass here, President of the Omaha UFO Study Group, back with you for a presentation called Striking UFOlogy. This was first given at the University of Nebraska UNO MUFON Society Symposium in 2018. Actually, it was first debuted at the first annual Omaha Haunticon. Now, there are many ways to approach the topic of UFOs and ETs, but here's the access point I've chosen for today. We can look at the Breakthrough Initiatives program. This is a more than $200 million science-based project founded in 2015. Now, there are four initiatives. First is Breakthrough Listen, which involves $100 million cash infusion into the SETI program, made popular in the Carl Sagan film Contact. Second is Breakthrough Watch, which involves inventing new or better telescopes designed to find carbon life forms where intelligence like ours could sprout. Third is Breakthrough Starshot. Now, this is a photograph of an engineering solution to traveling through interstellar space that involves nanocraft and light sails. Personally, my hope is that Dave Perez's work with Space Warp turns out to be the better solution. But here's what I want to talk about. The fourth initiative is called Breakthrough Message. It's a contest for school-age kids or anyone else to help decide what we should say to ET as a gesture of first contact. Here's the guidance and guidelines for the Breakthrough Message. Quote, "We pledge not to transmit any message until there has been wide-ranging debate at high levels of science and politics on the risks and rewards of contacting advanced civilizations." Now pause for a moment. What can you imagine would be the risks of contacting an advanced civilization? What are they worried about? Well, the reasoning goes like this. NASA's Kepler Space Telescope has confirmed the existence of over 3,000 exoplanets, some percentage of which I don't know are Earth-like. What we've discovered is the average Earth-like planet is 2 billion years older than Earth. Now, if you take a moment to imagine how far we've advanced in technology over the last 100 years, you can easily come to the conclusion, like the late Stephen Hawking did here when he said, ET will be vastly more powerful and may not see us any more valuable than we see bacteria. Yes, we should be afraid because past history suggests any time a more powerful civilization encounters a weaker one, it does not go well. So it's reasonable to conclude ET will be rapacious marauders in search of resources to plunder and planets to conquer. In other words, the risks are boo! What we are getting here now in the last 30 years is exactly what we might expect if they are so far advanced. Abduction stories, terrifying and intrusive physical examinations, missing time, an alien agenda with high strangeness clouded or disguised in misinformation, in such a way everyone experiencing the phenomena is subject to ridicule. There are reports from only the last few decades. That's what these reports are, but what if it's worse? What could be more frightening than this? Well, here's something. Consider a brief history of human beings according to anthropology. Some 200,000 years ago, the species homo-sapien emerged as hunter-gatherers, with a lifespan of about 35 years tops. Now, isn't it weird that only in the last 5,000 years did we really do anything remotely interesting, such as proto-writing, hieroglyphics, building pyramids, inventing the wheel, and agriculture? Or even given the most recent evidence of huge monolithic structures like the grounds of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey 10 to 12,000 years ago. 190 to 195,000 years go by with basically no change, almost nothing. Then, all of a sudden, there's an explosion of higher level thought almost instantaneously around the world. New methods of thinking in philosophy in Persia, India, China, and Greco-Roman civilizations. It's kind of hard to miss, don't you think? I mean, what happened? What can account for all of these sudden advances after almost nothing happened for tens of thousands of years? The German-Swiss psychiatrist and philosopher Karl Jaspers calls it a, quote, striking parallel development, end quote. It cries out for an explanation. What struck the Earth to cause this striking development? Logically, we have to go there. Some kind of exchange is the best explanation. The strike that must have occurred is something like an advanced civilization that found our planet and interacted with it. Take morality, for example. Up until the axial age, it seems the common moral system would have been something like treat people the way you feel. If you're mad, be clear about it. Bare your teeth. Let them know. Then we discovered, hey, that's not nice. Don't treat others in a way you wouldn't want to be treated. How would that make you feel? That's something we would tell kindergartners to socialize them properly, and I hope you've learned your lesson. Only a few hundred years later did we discover the golden rule that says, oh, hey, wait a minute. We should not only not treat people the way they don't want to be treated, we should do unto others as we would have them do unto us. What's the best explanation for the emergence of a moral philosophy like this, as well as building technology, agriculture, philosophy, and religion? Something striking happened. It's a puzzle. It came from somewhere, so the argument tells us that logically we can't rule out ancient aliens. After all, the fact this series of total speculation and assumptions has lasted for 12 seasons, actually I think it's 13 seasons now, it must mean something. Ancient aliens? It's true. All of it. The dark side, the Jedi, they're real. Now I'd like to share with you, this is the substance of this presentation, 4 possible strikes that have been offered by 3 different methods to explain how our culture just exploded with higher level thought and reasoning and higher level morality that continues to this day. The first is by Emanuel Swedenborg, a Swedish scientist, philosopher, and mystic. Swedenborg's method was by revelation or divine disclosure. The second is by interpretation of earliest forms of writing, in this case by the work of Zechariah Sitchin, translating Sumerian clay tablets written many thousands of years ago. Sitchin believes these clay tablets tell a creation story that we have forgotten. The third and fourth strikes involve the same means of psychic channeling or mediumship. They use a similar method but obtain different results. So they must be distorted in some way. Now I can share why this is the case with all channeling, but for the rest of this presentation I'd like to briefly summarize what these 4 strikes are offering to explain this puzzle. Although they are very different, I encourage you to think about what these 4 strikes have in common that might point to the truth of the matter. This in science is called comparative analysis. So Emanuel Swedenborg, he entered the dream state, and after being warned not to eat too much, I'm not exactly sure what that was about, he began to access a gift of mystical wisdom that imparted to him some understanding that he conveyed in many writings. Swedenborg learned in his vision that there is a physical world and a spiritual realm. He learned of the plurality of worlds that was first proposed back in the axial age of Democritus. There are human beings in the afterlife, living on Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, Saturn, and the Moon. Swedenborg developed an elaborate system of philosophy and theology to explain how we interact with beings in the spiritual realm, but who can have contact with us on Earth and don't need to have an incarnated presence here in a physical body. But the message Swedenborg imparted was a discovery related to the cause of human suffering. In his best-known book, Heaven and Hell, Swedenborg discovers that God is one, although his concept is more like saying, has no opposite. He says love of self and the world drives one toward hell, whereas love of God and of fellow beings drives one toward heaven. God is one. God doesn't make us suffer. We do when we turn away from the oneness. Angels are what Swedenborg calls correspondences, in that their environment spiritually reflects their mental state. Angels are restraining evil spirits and demons in much the same way we encounter good entities and bad entities in ufology. So think of it this way. We are correspondences reflecting our habitual mental state. We are restraining our malevolent temptations by trying to do the same thing, much like Homer Simpson is doing here. Collectively, we are on our way from materialistic beings to becoming spiritual beings. In the end, we are one, but such is our journey to realize this oneness. Second, so we have Zechariah Sitchin. He's not appreciated much in anthropology, but he sure is appreciated anywhere and everywhere in the Ancient Aliens hypothesis. It's a pretty elaborate history he came up with in his translation of the Sumerian cuneiform tablets. The Nephilim, referred to in the Holy Bible, also referred to as the Anunnaki, are giant ETs with long lifespans from the planet Nibiru or Planet X, which has a 3,600-year orbit around our Sun. When Nibiru passes by Jupiter, it's been close enough for there to have been multiple insertions influencing life on our planet from these humanoid creatures. Specifically, 300,000 years ago, there occurred a genetic altering of the Nephilim Anunnaki on our planet, with the species Homo erectus, called Adama, which is where we get the name Adam, and his story in the Bible. From a period of 300,000 years ago to 30,000 years ago, Anunnaki males bred with homo-sapien females, such as is described in Genesis 6, 1-4. These earliest hybrids lived for hundreds of years. So when you think about Adam, Noah, and all those begets and begats in the book of Genesis, describing their lifespan lasting up to 900 years, it's the result of interbreeding and DNA hybridization. It's the alteration of our DNA that has caused our lifespan to decrease over the years to about 35 years of life. That is the solution to the puzzle. All along, however, and especially before 300,000 years ago, there were incorporeal, disembodied intelligences involved with our evolution. This explains our sudden acquisition of technology, philosophy, religion, and morality over the last few thousand years. Our evolution as a species is intertwined with these beings in such a way we are indistinguishable from them. They are woven into the fabric of our being. We are one with them. The third possible strike comes from the psychic channeling of Edgar Cayce and his 30,000-some psychic readings. In a trance state, Cayce mostly prescribed medical advice to people who came to him, but he also gave readings where some aspect of his mind was able to access what's known as the Akashic Record. The Akashic Record is defined as a compendium of all human events, thoughts, words, emotions, and intentions ever to have occurred in the past, present, or future. When asked about ancient history, Cayce provided a coherent and unchanging story of how ancient beings called the Lemurians inhabited this planet in an advanced culture from 500,000 years ago to 250,000 years ago. This civilization died out, leaving traces of information in the Akashic record that can be rediscovered by anyone, or, according to some New Age people, can be downloaded by meditating with Lemurian crystals like these that have striations down them that resemble UPC barcodes. Atlantis was not just a story written by Plato as an allegory. It was an advanced human civilization that we forgot about from 200,000 years ago until it sank 10,000 years ago, about the time of Göbekli Tepe occurred, and about the time of a worldwide flood, like in the story of Noah and many other cultural records. Cayce says there are many ET civilizations in our galaxy, the most advanced being the Arcturians. Cayce's readings say that we are souls, not just physical bodies that die, and as we journey as souls to other planets between lifetimes. The soul journey has a direction, Cayce says. It's, quote, on its way home. The soul is learning life lessons about the unity of all there is on its way back to some unitive state of oneness. Now, I've got to ask you at this point, is any of this beginning to sound familiar? In case you aren't seeing it, here are the 3 sections of Edgar Cayce's readings that make the point pretty clear. Each soul is a corpuscle in the body of God. Corpuscle means small body. So we have in Cayce the idea of a body within a body. There is oneness, the body of which is a collection of smaller bodies. Or to use the term mind, there is one mind, that is, the mind of God, out of which are derived corpuscles. These corpuscles we mistakenly think to call our individual selves, like I'm in this body over here and you're in that body over there. Now, incidentally, Isaac Newton used this term in his corpuscular theory of light. We now call them photons or photon packets, meaning visible light particle, which is not so much a particle as it is the smallest aspect of the electromagnetic field and the carrier of the force of electromagnetism. So we need to think of the soul as a coalescing corpuscle of oneness, in the same way light is neither a wave or a particle with any substance. What we tend to get is amnesia, since we think of ourselves as separate beings. This is what we tend to get amnesia over. It's this notion of oneness Cayce believes is important for us to remember for at least 6 months straight here. The moral message here is the same when Cayce asks us to ask ourselves, where is thine own will, one with his, or the glorifying of thine own desires, thine own selfish interests? Now, the 4th strike I'm talking about is from the channeling of Carla Rueckert from 1981 to 1984 called The Raw Material. Carla would find herself in a trance state. One man would ask her questions, which were all recorded, and a third would write down observations. Ra describes itself as a mind-body-spirit complex. Imagine 2 people being in love, loving one another until they become one, until those 2 become one. Now imagine that depth of unity again and again until you have what the law of one calls a mind-body-spirit complex. That's sort of what's going on here. So imagine a collection of beings with one mind existing in a region of space like that of a solar system or a galaxy like in this photo. Ra is a mind-body-spirit complex existing at a level called sixth density. Now, sixth density is characterized as love and light that can transmit its will through energy vibrations. Fifth density beings have the light or wisdom ability to manifest physical things, like UFOs, communicate telepathically, and alter one's sense of the passage of time, and they have all the powers of transporting their complex across vast distances of space. Third density is where our planet is now, with all of us existing as minds confined to a physical body during the waking state, or at least that's the illusion. We are capable of serving ourself and worldly material things, or loving and serving others. Same goes for other beings with which we interact. Some are nefarious, some are benevolent. We are at this time, according to the raw material, transitioning from third density to fourth density, where we will begin to gain access to ESP-type abilities. The Law of One is a system of understanding the route from separation to oneness. In the same way you are a mind-body-spirit complex, that is a collection of atoms and cells known as an organism, Ra is a mind-body-spirit, a collection or group concrescence of coalescing consciousness with a certain density or vibration. Ra just happens to be a couple billion years more advanced along this return path to oneness, that is, the foundation or ground of everything. Ra identifies itself as a social memory complex back in the times of ancient Egypt, where it, or they, walked the earth with us and attempted to transmit information, which became distorted. That is the Law of One's solution to this puzzle. So what you have to imagine here is the next steps in evolution, where our individual identity is understood to be an illusion that expands to form a collective identity. The reason this information becomes distorted is that we can't help but believe we are contained in a physical body. You have to be able to trace your own development like Ken Wilber does here with his concept of the 4 quadrants, and imagine evolution as a series of steps towards greater complexity that continues to transcend and include its ancestors. Okay, so what does all this mean? Remember, the title of this presentation is Striking UFOlogy. I'm trying to point out there is an explanation for our striking parallel development 10,000 years ago, where technology, art, morals took a quantum leap. The answer to the question, what struck, boils down to amnesia. We've forgotten what happened, and we've forgotten who and what we are. Zechariah Sitchin's interpretation of ancient texts is that there is a physical explanation that came by way of DNA hybridization with the Anunnaki that we have forgotten. Emanuel Swedenborg, Edgar Cayce, and the Law of One material provide a mental description that points to mind-body-spirit complexes on a path toward discovering a oneness that underlies everything, but that we have forgotten. Other beings, even those 2 billion years more advanced than us, are on the same journey. Our interaction with them has had risks and rewards because they reveal a truth that is both terrifying and profound. Our encounters with these other beings or mind-body-spirit complexes are fraught with all kinds of distortion because the truth is literally above our heads. We can't help but thinking of ourselves as separate beings. So keeping all that in mind, perhaps there is another way to look at UFOs in the modern world and our social commerce with these beings, and why they are so elusive to photograph. From the late 1800s flying ships to the Battle of L.A. to McMinnville and Washington, D.C. craft buzzing the Capitol. Perhaps there is another way to look at those claiming to have had contact with ETs that involved loss of time, like in the Betty and Barney Hill case, to the high strangeness and hypnotic regression of Nebraska's most famous case of Herbert Schirmer, to the case of my friend John Foster in Lincoln, whose flood of recollections in the 1980s created in him a sense of pure trauma as well as profound depth of meaning. Perhaps there's a reason to explain how and why the 9 types of alien species identified by the Mutual UFO Network look like us, are bipedal, can speak our language or communicate with us telepathically, and claim to inhabit other star systems. And perhaps there's a reason why some of them seem really bad and some of them seem really good and carry a message of wanting to help humanity. Perhaps there's a better way of understanding how the truth can get distorted when we get conflicting information about leagues of conspiracies, about hidden organizations like the Cabal and the Illuminati, and a secret space program with all sorts of high-profile players involved that seem to be aimed at disinformation and cover-up. Perhaps there's some truth to the Wolf model of ET space programs. You can always pause this and come back to look at it if you want. Or the Corey Goode model that pits us as being caught in an interplanetary struggle involving the Dark Fleet, the Draconian Federation, the Sphere Beings, or the Solar Warden Group. Go ahead and pause this if you want to have a look. Or perhaps T.L. Keller's hybrid model is capturing some essential core to the secret space program. The alliances and treaties formed with our secret world government and our efforts to develop anti-gravity craft? I really don't know. What I do know is this. For the last 100 years, physicists have known about the strange world we live in, and the many of the founding fathers of modern physics became flaming mystics that sound like the channeling of Cayce and the law of one material. Max Planck, Nobel Prize-winning German physicist, gave us this conclusion. I can tell you as a result of my research about the atoms this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force, which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds the most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent spirit. This spirit is the matrix of all matter. So the Starshot Message Prize wants us to be aware of the risks and rewards before contacting alien life forms. What I'm saying is that at least in the last 60 years, there is already a pattern with regard to the nature and experience with UFOs and encounters with other beings. That pattern shows a set of risks and rewards that experiencers have already encountered. The risks are paranoia, delusions, distortions of reality, trauma, terror, and a loss of self and self-control. Why? Because this truth of oneness is extremely frightening. The rewards, on the other hand, are euphoria and ecstasy, temporary glimpses of oneness that provide profound meaning, purpose, and a sense of fulfillment. So in any case, the possibility seems striking to me. So that's the reason for the title of this presentation. So I'll leave you with this quotation from Max Planck. Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature, and that is because, in the last analysis, we ourselves are part of the mystery that we are trying to solve. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you appreciate this exploration into one such possibility of an explanation for ufology.